Now, I typically never tell you to shy away from too many pieces of equipment except for the rare ones or the ones that are well over 40 years old. But what about the ones that aren't rare and are around 30 years old or less? What about those? If you're on the fence about it, what if I told you they were free? Would that change your mind, or would it even matter how much it costs? In today's video, we look at this Homelight leaf blower, and the problem is that it starts, but it's not running like it's supposed to. Of course, the fix for almost any two-stroke piece of equipment would be to go through the entire fuel system from the tank all the way to the carb. But before I spoil the surprise on this blower, I wanted to talk about other issues you can run into, and with the condition of this particular blower, I'm obviously going to clean it before I do anything with it. Now, if you want to see the repair video for this blower, there should be a link to that video on the screen. However, this is only the cleaning video, so if that's not what you're looking for, I'd like to thank you for your time. Now, this video was made while I was still experimenting with my cleaning technique, so you won't be seeing or hearing the paint sprayer in the background. I was also trying to find a good cleaner at the time, so for this one, I'm only using soap and water and rinsing with perhaps the worst spray bottle ever that's just filled with water. Basically, I was trying to prove that you don't always have to use the most caustic cleaners on the market or even anything special to clean your equipment, but at the same time, it's going to show you just how effective using just soap and water can be. So if you don't want to use or can't use stronger cleaners, this will show you that you can still clean your equipment. So why am I just wiping the soap and water off the blower? Well, it was also to prove the fact that you don't always need to use a lot of water when cleaning your equipment, but when it comes to tighter areas, I won't be able to wipe the area clean, so instead I will use the spray bottle. From what I gathered after talking to the previous owner, this blower has been sitting in the barn for quite some time unused, and if you didn't know it, one of the worst things you can do to a two-stroke engine is to leave it alone, especially with fuel in the tank. The reason is because over time, as the fuel changes to turpentine or paint thinner, it will start to destroy or damage every component in the fuel system. Now, this doesn't hurt the fuel tank because it can handle extended contact with gasoline and oil. However, the fuel lines don't take it very well. Also, the diaphragm inside the carb will also start to be damaged by the extended contact. Now, fuel lines haven't changed all that much in the last few years, so getting them isn't obviously an issue. The same goes for the diaphragms. Unless you go in for the spiral steel ones that cost as much as an OEM carb, I do apologize, I'm never going to buy them. If you take enough precautions, replacing the diaphragm every 2 to 3 years would be more cost effective than buying the new design. Of course, that's with me replacing the diaphragms and not having a shop do it. We're also at the point of the whole conversation, which is replacing the carb. My motto is, if I clean the carb once and rebuild it and there's still an issue, I replace the carb. The reason why is because it keeps me from wasting my time and keeps me sane. Having to clean the carb multiple times only to get the same result is not what I would call fun. Of course, if I wanted to increase my chances of a successful carb cleaning, I would just get an ultrasonic cleaner, but that's not a guarantee either. So when that doesn't work, there's nothing left to do but replace the carb. So that should be the end of the conversation, right? Well, that only brings up another issue, which is finding the right parts, especially the carb. Now, after looking up the model and serial number for this blower on my favorite website that is free for anyone to use, you'll find that many of the items to be discontinued or obsolete, which is never a good sign. So what happens when you can't find a replacement carb for this blower? Unfortunately, there's not much that can be done. The only thing that you can do is to replace it with a good working used unit from another website where you can find old comics, vintage items, and basically anything else that's used and isn't carried anymore. I'm obviously not going to say the name of the website, but I think you know what I'm talking about. If you still don't know, Weird Al made a song about it. The next most likely reason for this blower to start and run, but not run the way it's supposed to, would be that the piston ring and cylinder are scored or just worn out. Of course, there's not much you can do except replace these parts as well. And if you hadn't figured it out, these parts are also tough to find. Now, if you look hard enough, you will find them. Unfortunately, the parts will cost more than the blower is worth. So hopefully I've made my point as to why you should steer clear of older equipment, especially this blower, but if you've seen some of my other videos, you'll know that I vouch for older machines too. So which is it, steer clear or go ahead and just take the risk? To answer that question, I'm going to give you a few reasons why you should go right ahead and buy them. The first reason is price. You're not going to buy a blower, mower, or trimmer from the 1990s that costs as much as a brand new one, would you? Of course not. And the best part is these machines are priced well below new machines at the dealers and at the big box stores. But if it's cheap, doesn't that mean it's not a quality part? Not necessarily. Of course, if you were going to buy a new blower and the lower price unit was half the cost of the name brand one, you would think, hey, this cheap one isn't going to last as long as the more expensive one. The problem is I haven't seen any sort of testing that proves that. What I have seen is that generally when consumers buy the more expensive ones, they tend to take better care of it than if they had bought the cheaper one. They generally use a better quality oil, use better fuel, and don't seem to throw them around as much as the cheaper unit, so they tend to last a little bit longer, and it only makes sense. The expensive blower is such a massive investment, you'll generally take better care of it whether you're aware of it or not. The opposite can be said for the cheaper units. When you buy a cheap blower, why would you buy the expensive oil for it? So most consumers buy the cheapest oil available. The same goes for abusing it. Why would you take good care of it when it's so affordable you can easily replace it next season? So consumers tend to let them get bounced around more often than the one that's twice the price. Now this is of course not a rule, just an observation. I have seen some consumers take good care of cheap equipment and last them for more than a few seasons. The next reason is quality. If you haven't noticed it, as the old model goes away, the new model seems to be made of less metal and more plastic, and yet the price still goes up. I thought plastic was cheaper to manufacture than a metal part, so if they're saving money by making it with more plastic, why isn't it cheaper? Unfortunately, I don't think manufacturers want their stuff to last for a decade anymore. If I'm reading this right though, that means the older the models, the better the quality they were. Now, I'm not saying this home light blower is better and is going to outlast a current Stihl, Redmax, or Echo blower, but the older ones feel more robust. Now, I don't have any data to prove their quality was better. I'm just using the belief that the newer models keep going up in price and yet feel cheaper than the ones they're replacing. The last and final reason is more environmental. No, I'm not turning into environmentalist or anything like that. What I'm saying is that the older ones are still around, so why not use them until they can't be used any longer versus buying the newer plastic fantastic model. I'm actually going for more of a retro point of view, but it sounds better if I present it this way. It's older. It's what your dad or granddad used, and now you're using it. How cool is that? Now, you may not think so, but I certainly do. So does every piece of old machinery deserve a second chance at doing their job? Not really. Have you seen some of the older machines? Talk about a safety hazard. But I would like to get them working again and used purely as a conversational piece, but as a daily driver, maybe not. So in the end, it looks a whole lot better. No, it's not going to win any awards, but it should be clean enough to safely work on the carb or even the engine. Now, I didn't take it completely apart, but if I do have to go any deeper, I'll do more cleaning, but for right now, this will be just fine. Now, if you haven't heard this blower working, it sounds fantastic, and with 30 cc's, it's got a decent amount of power, but just getting any piece of equipment that's over 30 years old working again just makes me feel a whole lot better. Thank you for watching. I really do appreciate your time here. Please feel free to ask me any questions about this project or about your own projects, and I hope to see you in the next video.